Okay, we're recording now, so I'm going to start my intro.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the latest in the series of podcasts from Neurodiversity in Business. Today, I'm really delighted to be welcoming my friend Pete Wharmby, who's the well-known autistic author and very respected ND advocate. And I was really keen to get Pete on, and it's taken us a few months because his diary is incredibly busy. But I wanted to get him involved because he's got a really authentic voice in terms of lived experience from within the ND community. And today we're going to be talking about the social aspect of what corporates could be doing around getting the best out of their neurodivergent talent. So, Pete, welcome. I'm really pleased to have you on board today. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you very much for having me. It's really great to be involved with what you're doing with neurodiversity in business. It's been wonderful watching it kind of grow and develop over the course of the year on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and in the real world, obviously. It's a really good thing, I think, to be pushing and to be trying to get. To be a kind of focal point in the business world, and I'm very glad to be able to join you and share a few thoughts, really.
Great, well, thank you, Pete. So I'm going to be pumping you through information really today, and trying to get support the corporate world in understanding what's important from the neurodivergent employee, and importantly, potential employee, those people who are disenfranchised or excluded from even getting through to employment. So we, in previous podcasts, we've talked a lot around the kind of the functional aspects of how organizations need to change, etc., and what they need to do, policy, procedures, etc. But what I'd love to understand, because you've got some great experience on this, Pete, is the social changes that corporates need to do. And I think, they're the more abstract terms, aren't they, around the communication, the talking, the socializing. So just to help inform our audience then, what does this term mean to you? What are we going to talk about today?
Well, I'd quite like to talk about, as you said, the social aspect of accommodations. There are, as you rightly pointed out, very practical accommodations that are very regularly offered, and they should be. Things like, allowing neurodivergent workers to have flexible hours, or to have amendments given to their working area, for brightness of lights and temperature and things like that. Even working from home, there are lots of, very positive, very good quality practical accommodations that are often put in place, but that's only part of what neurodivergent and especially autistic people are likely to require. And I'm very interested in the social aspect. So this is the abstract world of communication expectations. I think it's the expectations that the neurotypical people will have of any kind of social interaction with somebody in the workplace, and obviously, when autistic people are involved in that, what we often tend to find is the neurotypical people feel that something has gone wrong, or that there is something missing, or that the autistic person is being rude or unpleasant or standoffish or cold, or any of these many different kind of negative adjectives that you could think of. And I think that that's really problematic, because you can have all of the practical accommodations in the world, but if as an autistic person your work life is dominated by social interaction where you come away from it being viewed in a very negative light because of just the way you are as an autistic person, then it's not going to help that much. There will be a limit as to how far that autistic person will be able to cope with being that negatively viewed individual.
Yeah, and I love what you did there, Pete, actually, because you reframed the discussion to actually being incredibly people-centric. So everything that the corporate world can do, which we all want to see, but actually what's super important is how that person experiences the culture and the working environment, right?
Yeah, exactly, because that's at the center of everything. If you want to be attracting and retaining good quality employees who can do the job well, you don't want to be alienating them and making them feel dreadful on a day-to-day basis, simply because their communication style is different to those around.
Yeah, agree. And this is what I'm hearing from the Neurodiversity in Business membership as well, is that there's absolutely the prime focus on retention, because we're in that war for talent at the moment, and not many of our members, Pete, as you'll know from your experience in the corporate world, are proactively going out there and hiring ND talent. But what they are trying to do initially is they're trying to think, how can we actually enable these people that are in the business to thrive rather than just survive?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Because if you're going to get the best out of somebody, no matter what the job might be, whatever the business or the corporation might be, you've got to ensure that they are not feeling that they are, as I say, like a social pariah, in that workplace. So, for no good reason. We have to remember that when autistic people struggle and we may come across as rude or unpleasant in lots of ways, we're 9 times out of 10, we're really not trying to do that. It's not something that we're attempting to. It doesn't reflect our personality. We're actually often doing our very, very best, just to do the social thing, to have that contact. And it just comes across as different because we are different, and there has to be an awareness and an accommodation of that.
Right. And so I'm sure most of our audience here, we're going to be preaching to the converted, we hope, but then also converting some other people. But let's make this tangible then. So for the managers or for the peers of those employees, what's the right thing to do, both to kind of improve the awareness of neurodiversity, and you've been talking about autism, but then also how is it best to actually understand the person? Is it acceptable to kind of put this out there and say, look, how do I interact with you? What do you prefer? What's the best kind of communication channels? What would be your advice there, please, Pete?
Well, I think to start with, for the first part there, it's about raising awareness and understanding. That has to underpin everything. And I think that awareness raising has to be very, very detailed, and it has to be directed at middle leadership at the very least. Because they're the ones who are going to be potentially having these conversations and dealing with these situations, and that has to be delivered by autistic individuals, I personally believe, as much as possible. And to be quite honest with you, I feel that most of the time it's 100% possible, as long as the will is there to ensure that happens, so that these middle leaders and just the colleagues, peers, have a greater understanding of what autism is. Because if they know that an autistic trait, for example, is to avoid hinting and to be maybe a little bit more blunt with feedback or with criticism, etc., etc. If they know that, then I think it stands to reason, therefore, they will be better able and better armed to deal with it when it happens, rather than chalking it up to rudeness or, kind of antisocial kind of personality or something like that. I think once you've got that base level of understanding, then a lot of this will sink into place, quite naturally, I think, in the same way as, knowing how anything, knowing the reality of anything will always inherently help any situation. I think for the second part, though, kind of very clear, non-abstract things that we can put into place. I think, and whether or not you can actually approach the autistic person and say, well, what do you want? Well, it will depend on the individual. I would like to think that with every autistic person in a workplace who's declared themselves as being disabled or has declared themselves as being neurodivergent in some way, that there would have been a conversation as a result of that, either with their immediate leader or with HR or whoever is responsible for that, for that kind of thing. And I believe that in that conversation, then that should be brought up, and there should be a question of how comfortable are you to talk about what you need when it comes to a social situation. And you judge it from there, because of course they may be comfortable, in which case listen to them, that's great, or they may not be quite so comfortable, in which case you might have to step back a little.
And what I'm hearing from the NiB membership is that there's a big difference between that formal element of what HR are putting in place, or senior management, as against the peers, the people on the the coalface sitting next to you in the office. So I'd love to kind of probe a little bit more, if I may, Pete, on that very personal and individualized response. So there is still some nervousness around how do we talk about it, what's the right language. So from kind of you being in the workplace and kind of understanding this from a lived experience point of view, what are the right tips for peers, work people, to kind of interact and kind of tease these topics out?
Well, I've always said that it's all about breaking the taboo. To be honest with you, there is a very strong sense. I don't know whether this is just a UK thing or whether this will be found elsewhere. That any kind of disability is inherently a taboo subject that we're not very comfortable with talking about. Which
the British way, isn't it, Pete?
Yes, yeah, it's the least helpful thing imaginable. It really is, and it makes me wonder sometimes how people might benefit from that. Let's just say, if we're not able to, if we don't feel able to talk about disability, there might be people who are able to benefit from that. But anyway, the point is we need to break that taboo. We need to make it very, very clear, and this is something I do on a regular basis, that neurodiversity, being neurodivergent, is not something to be ashamed of. It is not a taboo subject. It is something that shall and can be spoken of openly, because there's nothing wrong with it. It just is. We happen to be that way, and that is fine. And it's something that I've brought from my career as a teacher more than anything, because I found that the moment I started to be truly open about autism in the classroom, even with classes of students who might be seen in some ways as being quite challenging, in terms of their attitude towards difference and that kind of thing. I've always found that once that taboo is lifted and once I'm quite open about it and happy to talk about it, then everyone's just interested and perfectly okay with it, and we ended up with situations where students who were autistic were quite happy to talk about it, and I talk about it too, and the non-autistic students would be like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, that's interesting. We're talking 15-year-old boys who wouldn't generally be that interested in that kind of thing, actually hooking on and being like, oh, okay, this is interesting information about my fellow human beings. I'm invested in this. And to be quite honest with you, if 15-year-old boys in school can do that, then employees in a workplace can definitely do that. But the trouble is, of course, you can't put that onus of breaking the taboo onto the individual autistic person in the workplace, because it's too much. I chose to do that of my own will, admittedly, but I felt that I had the capacity to do that. A lot of autistic or ADHD or otherwise neurodivergent people might not feel, quite rightly, that they have that capacity, to smash taboos and to break that open. So there has to be some support there, I think, from somebody, whoever's best placed, whether it be a mentor or a team leader or a buddy system or whatever it might be. There has to be some kind of support put in place there, I think, for that to be realistic on a wide scale. Got it.
And look, I speaking very frankly, I'm an optimist. I have to be in my role and kind of what we're trying to achieve in NiB. But also, I do see that across the corporate world, we are in a position where it's actually pretty immature in terms of neurodiversity at work programs. There are things in place. They tend to be quite tactical, very narrowly focused in one part of the business, and also we tend to be learning from, learning as we go, to be honest. So I do have that optimist slant here, but then also I just want to apply that realism. What are the things that corporate world is still doing terribly? And I don't mind you being very harsh here, Pete, because we need to learn, right? We need to get better. So just give me a couple of examples that jump out to you that you think, gosh, when I wake up in the morning, I really wish we could be doing better.
I think the biggest one, we're back to that base level of understanding again. I think that corporations and other organizations too, governments and so on and so forth, are very, very keen to do the right thing here, okay, for various reasons, and that's great, no problem with that at all. I just don't think that the base level of understanding is often there. There are organizations like Neurodiversity in business who are fighting to try and raise that understanding up, but it's still not there across the board with all corporations because they haven't got the capacity, perhaps, or they haven't got the true interest, if I want to be really cruel, that maybe they want to do it, but they don't want to invest too much into it, if that makes sense. I think if you're going to do it properly, it does need proper investment, of time, especially, and money as well, of course, because you've got to get it right. You have to get it right, and you have to make sure that the information that's disseminated is accurate and not based on some stereotype that dates back to the 1990s or even worse, the 1980s, because that's what I find more than anything when I'm going out and talking to businesses, councils, schools, etc., hospitals, universities, etc., etc. I'm still fighting the same old stereotypes. I'm still fighting the Rain Man stereotype, all the time. And you wouldn't expect that, to be honest. You really wouldn't. You would think that things had moved past. but they haven't. In a lot of places they haven't. So I think that's the scariest thing for me, because obviously stereotypes can be very harmful, and we have to, eradicate them and avoid them. So I would say that's one of the biggest things. I think the other thing really is to and I think neurodiversity in business is providing this. It's joining things up. It's working together to make the job more manageable. Rather than reinventing the wheel 1,000 times across the country, across the world. A little bit of collaboration, I think, could go a long way. And I think that NiB obviously is in a great position, and it's enabling that quite nicely. But I think that would be really, really key, as we move forward.
Great. Well, Pete, as ever, I always learn from talking to you, and I genuinely mean this. It's so great to hear your experience, and also allow us to focus on those areas that we should bring up to the priority list, because I think a lot of businesses just struggle with the sheer volume of activity, and they need to think more strategically. What do I do first? What's going to be the most impactful? And look, what I'd love to do is just kind of have a gem in my head really here, is that maybe bring you back in a few months with some corporates and actually have like a panel debate, because I think them being able to question someone like you and have that genuine real-time interaction would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that. Any opportunity I get to try to improve things, I'm happy to take. So yes, that would be great.
Fantastic. Well, Pete, can I just say on behalf of our membership and our audience today how much we valued your time and you giving that so generously. So thank you for that. We look forward to that opportunity in a few months of coming back and revisiting this topic. And to my membership, what I would say is, Pete's incredibly vocal out there on social media, on Twitter in particular, and LinkedIn. Do follow Pete. Pete, what's your tag?
On Twitter, it's @comaficionado. So yeah, it's really awkward. I've had that for 15 years now, and I daren't change it, because if I do that, then everyone will forget who I am. So @comaficionado. It's like, lover of commas, if that makes sense.
We'll put it up. We'll put it up on screen. Don't worry. And on LinkedIn, quite easy. Pete Wharmby, I guess.
Yes, yeah. People get in touch. Drop me a line, ask advice, whatever it is you're interested in. I'm always happy to give my thoughts, and respond as best as I can to anything that anyone has to say or ask.
Great. No, so I'd encourage all of our membership and audience, do reach out to Pete. He's a gold mine of information and a really authentic voice from our community. So thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you've learned a little bit, as indeed I have today. And Pete, thank you, and we'll see everyone else in the near future. Take good care.
Thank you very much.